Well, I'm not going to get into a type of feud, for sure, if that's what some people want me to get all fired up against Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. So that's not going to happen because his personal interactions with me have been far more than cordial and nice and friendly. And we talk all the time. But do we have thoughts? Of course, everyone has thoughts. Firstly, I can't actually fully comment because I don't know the full context of his meeting and who he was talking to. But I do have a couple things I would like to share with everybody. First of all, he is correct when he says they're two different epistemologies. But what I would have wished had happened, and maybe later he did that, maybe he just felt that it wasn't the right time, is to say why one of them is extremely flawed. That's the issue. Because the historical critical method is flawed from its outset. It has its own biases. Let me ask you this. If somebody says he's a Christian historian, so he studies history, and he's a Christian, you would expect there to be certain beliefs that underwrite his epistemology in history, correct? You would expect him to believe Jesus was crucified. That is a fact. Therefore, the level of information that renders that to be a fact is enough to render anything else to be a fact. You'd also believe that this person will discount as a transmitter of information anybody who says that that is not a fact, that Jesus didn't die on the cross, or that there was no such thing as Jesus. He would probably dismiss that as a historical source, right? Things like that. You would expect him to have some kind of beliefs that color his view of deriving a historical truth. The Western historical method is not immune from this. These are not objective people who have risen above the creation and are only dealing with facts. They are not that. And that's the issue that needed to be said. That's what needs to be said. They are, in fact, a people whose historical background has colored their lens to view all religious sources and orthodoxy with circumspect and suspicion. The Western historical method, the historical critical method, comes out of the Renaissance movement. A movement in which Europeans realized the Catholic Church has been frauding us, has been lying to us in the two most important things. You could really easily find this information out there. One piece of information is that the actual physical property of the Vatican is given to them as a donation by Constantine. That's a lie. And what it was, the guy's name was Valla, Lorenzo Valla, who was the one who discovered that words were used in that document that didn't exist before. Didn't exist at that time. So when your number one physical headquarters of the people who make your worldview have frauded you and lied about the actual property, what else did they lie about? How about the actual most important verse in the Bible for contemporary Christianity is the Trinity? And that famous verse that points to the Trinity. That's also Erasmus is involved in this. You know, he's a font, but he's a historical figure who was involved in the study and the writing down of the Bible. Tells that they asked him to put it in there. Just imagine that that's the number one location of your pilgrimage and your worship, and the capital, the headquarters of your religion, and the number one doctrine. Both lies. So what do you start to think now? The whole thing's a scam. They start studying languages. They start studying the manuscripts. They come out with a couple assumptions. The first one is that religious figures lie. Tradition and orthodoxy is a cover for fraud and control and abuse. That is literally the origin story of Western secularism. So when they grow and they become adults now and they go to other civilizations, they repeat the same thing. They go to the Japanese. And as Jonathan Brown said, like Indiana Jones or something, they go to these nations and they say, you got an orthodoxy, you got a tradition, you got a leadership. That's the source of all your problems. They're all liars, because in Europe, they were liars. This is psychologically what they call projection. That's the only thing I'm going to point out today, is that it started off with projection. They project. Hence, when they come to the Islamic tradition, they come with two issues. Number one, they go there with that projection in mind, just as they went to all other civilizations. When the intellectuals of Europe realized the church has been lying to us and controlling us and hurting us, they go around to every other civilization with the same lens. The second problem is that the Orientalists did not go and study the Muslim countries out of curiosity. They were funded to study them so that they could conquer them. They equally have a great bias. They went down to Africa, SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies. They went to China, Japan, study to prepare conquests. They're not completely objective here. In fact, they're extremely biased for these two reasons, an internal reason and an external motivation and cause. The idea that there are multiple epistemologies, yes, everyone's got an epistemology. The question is it valid or not? Should it be critiqued or not? The Hadith method, or what they call isnad cum metin analysis, the analysis of the isnad and the metin, is not taken on faith. It's taken on rational inquiry. If somebody comes and tells me, your prophet whom you love, he said this, that's essentially meaningless to me because I don't know you. I don't know who you're citing. I don't know why I should believe you. All this is rational. Does that mean I don't believe in the Prophet ﷺ? Does that mean I don't love the Prophet ﷺ? Of course not. So the hadith is based upon rational inquiry of people. For example, when somebody narrates a hadith about a public event and he's the only one to ever speak about that public event, muhaddithin didn't accept it because rationally it doesn't make any sense. If it's a public event, wouldn't have everyone else have talked about it? If the Prophet ﷺ had actually uttered the so-called satanic verses. The satanic verses is that Shaitan whispered some verses to the Prophet ﷺ while he was reciting Surah An-Najm and receiving the revelation of Surah An-Najm. Then Jibreel came back to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "Oh Muhammad, that's not a verse." One person narrates this ridiculous story. So wait a second, if that was the case, wouldn't the kuffar have talked about it? Wouldn't other Sahaba have talked about it? The Prophet was allegedly sitting at the Kaaba when this happens. So no, it's not accepted. As a side note, here's the amazing thing. This story, this lie about the Prophet is actually one of the proofs of the Quran that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because what is the second verse of Surah An-Najm? وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى. Your companion here, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he never went astray. He never made a mistake in the Quran. So literally the first verse of the surah after the beginning oath is a defense of the Prophet ﷺ from this lie and this story. When your country dominates every other country, you take yourself as a default, but you're not a default. And the British historians and the Western historians have taken themselves as a default, treat themselves as a default. So I don't call it the historical critical method. It is the Western historical critical method. And it comes with their assumptions and their worldview embedded in it, which is why when that aspect of their history is the determining factor of what they're telling us is true or false, then it's rejected on the spot. Hindus write history. Christians write history. Confucians write history. Muslims write history. Atheists write history. When I say atheists, I mean naturalists. People who believe that the laws of the universe can never be altered. Nothing ever could happen that contradicts the laws of nature. Miracles. What prophets do. Splitting the Red Sea. They do not believe in these things. So when they write history and they come upon a people who do believe in miracles, as we do, they already have judged these people as some delusional people, and that this is essentially some kind of lie and a scam to hoodwink people for material purposes, that they're hardcore materialists. Everything has to have a material gain because nothing else is real. Spirituality is not real. God's not real. These things are not real. So therefore, the motive must be material because there's nothing else. That's their belief. Before they become historians, before a person becomes a historian, he has to make epistemological decisions about what he believes exists. And if he believes that the laws of nature as they are right now is the only thing that could possibly be, then he's basically made a judgment that anyone who says he did the opposite or said they witnessed the opposite is a delusional person. Everything he says there are after that is a question mark on it. We Muslims hold that there are norms that God created. The only thing that is impossible is what is a rational contradiction. But for God to create things different from the norm, which we would call a miracle, that is very possible. And it is even possible after prophethood. Karamat al-awliya. It's possible for awliya to have karamat in Islam. We believe in that. It is possible for the awliya of Allah Ta'ala, at their hands, karamats can happen. We believe in more than that. It is possible for awliya al-shaitan, for satanic and demonic forces, to show us something like that too. What is the Dajjal? The Dajjal brings these things. So naturalism and materialism, they're basically two peas in a pod. When that's the basis of a person's belief about the world, then they are naturalist historians. It is not simply historical method, as if you are some neutral people who rose above the earth and above the creation, and you can objectively determine what happened. Because history has this idea. Very simple question. What happened in the past? And now we're going to go look for the evidence of that. Now, probably I would say the bulk of historical methods we agree with, right? Any rational person would agree with. But when we're talking about religions and prophets, there is this question of belief. Do you believe that miracles can occur? And when you don't, then how do you explain a person who believes in those things? You must believe he's either lying or he's deluded or something, or he's something like that, which would decrease. Either he's lying or he's deluded. In that case, your testimony has to be taken with an asterisk. So it's naturalist history. Why would I care what a naturalist has to say about the prophets and theology? And this is why I said yesterday, Yasir Qadhi is correct when he said the two different epistemologies. The outrage, the mistake, or the and as I said, I'm going to have Hosn done because maybe he said it elsewhere, maybe for some reason he didn't say it, but I know he believes it. Tell us, what is the issue with that history? Just because it's a different epistemology doesn't mean it's valid. It is invalid when assessing prophets. This methodology of naturalism and materialism, yes, you know where it's good? In making computers. It's good in making cars. It's good in the demonstrable realm of science and tech. You'll actually advance in that, because all you focus on is the material. We have no issues with that aspect. If you're in that field today, if you're in medical school, it doesn't make a difference if your teacher's a Hindu or a Muslim or a what have you, because it's a demonstrable science up until you get to ethical issues. So knowledge to us, you have to know, basic epistemology divides into demonstrable realities, things that we can see with our own two eyes. You put a beaker of blue and a beaker of yellow, what are you going to get? A beaker of green. Or there is rational knowledge. That's math and logic. Also, an equation is an equation. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, regardless of your religion. And there's transmitted knowledge. Transmitted knowledge has in it an assessment of the transmitter. And how they assess a transmitter is different than how we would assess a transmitter. A loyal follower of a prophet, when that prophet is to do miracles, and then he says, this follower of mine is upright, we will take from him what he says. But the naturalist, by the moment you said there's a miracle and there's prophecy and there's God, he's already determined that something's off with you and you'll be dismissed. That's what needs to be said. That's the issue here. As for the thoroughness of Hadith methodology, it's the most thorough history you're going to find in any subject. Why? Because religion has in it heaven and hell. Whether or not Napoleon, how long he stayed in Russia and how many people died in Russia, that's a mas'ala you can get right or wrong. There's going to be no consequence. Most history has no liability, but Hadith has a massive liability for you as a Muslim and for the transmitter especially. Do you transmit a lie on the Prophet? You can make many people's lives difficult. You mistransmit from the Prophet. You make people's lives very difficult by making something haram halal or halal haram. Now, here's the nerve of the British. And these are probably would be up there with one of the most arrogant civilizations. The idea that they're going to go into other civilizations and tell them what happened in their own civilization. Who would know better? The people who know the language, the people who have history, the people who have access with those people, to those people who know their nuances, who know their language, who know their habits, who know all their politics. Who would know better about the history of a society? Who would be a better historian? Who would be a better historian about Gaza in 30 years writing a documentary? Will it be a Palestinian or an Israeli? Or a Swede? Or a Brazilian? How about the guy who's able to go down there, speak the language, he knows the streets, he knows the avenues, he knows the history, he knows the people? Everyone will have a bias, but who will be a more competent historian? The one who knows stuff or the one who doesn't know stuff? So this idea that they have that, hold on a second, if you are one of them, you have an interest. What if you're not one of them, you also have an interest, right? There is no such thing as this objectivity that they're imagining they have. French Jesuit went to Algeria, did a full study of the Algerian people and their religion and everything, and he came back and he said that it's a very simple plan we all have to observe. He says, these Algerian people are going to give you a hard time. If you want to make your life easier, then start teaching the next generation to take that turban off their head, shave that beard, and take the beads out of their hands. Teach them an alternate view of the world. And once you remove that turban and those beads and they shave that beard, you can basically let them run their own country. It'll be in your interests.